Now, a very different strain of British miserableism, the apotheosis of rainy day moping that made Morrissey and his band The Smiths into one of the most distinctive pop groups of the 80s. Morrissey, as you may just be aware by now, has written an autobiography, a memoir that begins with a life that, for quite a long stretch, looked as if it was going nowhere. Morrissey hated school, was contemptuous of most of his contemporaries, and despised the very few jobs he was actually qualified for. Only popular music offered any kind of consolation for the continuing failure of the world to take him at his own assessment. And then, as Manchester's music scene boomed, Morrissey finally decided to stop being part of the audience.
A Wythenshawe band called the Nosebleeds have broken up, and Billy enlists their rhythm section for a wrangled spot at Manchester University where a cast of thousands will play, and we are ready with our 5 songs. The hall had been packed, and with my dark green nylon shirt from the antique market, I am fired from a cannon. It was probably nothing, but it felt like the world. What is this strange feeling as the crowd instantly applauds loudly? It is sexual release. Mine, not theirs. I sing forcefully, in tune, applause booms, and I'm home. History had trapped me for a long time, and now it must let me go. But my time with Billy's already over. He's been lassoed into joining the excellent theatre of hate who are ready for Top of the Pops, and history takes the strangest of turns. He tells me of a boy called Johnny Marr, who also lives in Wythenshawe and who is a much better guitarist than me. The suggestion is thoughtful, but I'm not the type to tap on people's windows. Luckily, Johnny Marr was the type to tap on people's windows, and Billy had also turned Johnny to face my direction.
Within a few months, The Smiths are a success, though it's one of the burdens of the book that they're never quite as successful as Morrissey would like, due to a combination of perfidy and incompetence on the part of his record labels, he thinks. Morrissey insisted that the book be published as a Penguin classic, a demand that is entirely characteristic of him, trembling between unreflective self-regard and a kind of knowing joke at the establishment's expense. Michael Ardity, this book was never going to get anything but mixed reviews. People get almost as much pleasure from hating Morrissey as they do from adoring him. Where do you stand?
Well, and before reading this, I was basically not interested in Morrissey at all. I have to say this doesn't get a mixed review from me. It gets probably the most damning review I've given in ages. I don't want to indulge in the sort of terrible hyperbole that he does on almost every page, but it's the worst written book I've read in years. He talks about there being many casualties in Morrissey land. Having read this, I feel as if I'm one, if only by proxy. I mean, the prose, to use one of his least happy neologisms, is vomitarian, which to you and me just means sick-making. If I can just quote a couple of things.
All right, just quickly, because I want to get round other people. Well, I'll give you a chance, I promise you. So let me go to the others first, and we'll come back for your choice quotes. Gillian Slover.
I mean, I both agree and I don't agree. There is an avalanche of words. It really needs cutting down. And sometimes I think it's unclear that he knows what he's actually saying. He's using all these words, and it's very, very repetitive. But I think there was something interesting in there. And in the end, I am glad I read it, although part of the time I wanted to throw it across the room. What I find extraordinary about it is this is an autobiography of 450-something pages, and I closed the book thinking, I know where he comes from, Manchester, and I know what that Manchester was like. I know what he did, which I had known beforehand, and I know who did him down, which is endlessly told.
Exhaustively.
But I have no idea who this man is, and he's written an autobiography which fails to tell us a single thing about him, except he's really difficult.
Giles
He's
Fraser.
an unreliable narrator of his own life. I mean, I imagine that's the suspicion you have of all autobiographies, I guess. But, I mean, one thing you get in this is that everybody's to blame but him. And, you know, there's no self-critical vigilance about him at all. He doesn't... it seems to be always about other people's fault.
There's just to say, I mean, you're absolutely right. There is just the occasional glimmer of self-knowledge. I mean, when one of the members of his bands leaves very close to the end of the book, he sort of says he immediately started, making complaints about me, all of which were true. So that just occasionally he acknowledges that he can be...
you found that in 500 pages, did you? I mean...
There's a moment when he's living in Hollywood opposite Johnny Depp, and he says, "Who looks away should I ever appear?" And you do feel that Johnny Depp knows something that probably we don't from reading this.
And at the moment at the end, he talks about meeting Julie Burchill, and he is absolutely horrible about her. And he says, like all bullies, she had never thought much of herself, and instead of changing the inner self, she decided to complain to anyone who had sit still long enough to listen. Now, this comes at a point when this man has been complaining about everyone, and you think... maybe that's what Morrissey's great skill is. He understands people, even if he has a distorted, and he knows that the person who is complaining like that about other people actually hates himself. And that's in the end what I thought. Morrissey hates himself.
But there are a lot of those inadvertent revelations, it seems to me. He writes about James Dean at one point. Like an unappreciated wife, he became exclusively absorbed in his own reflection, not because he loved himself, but because he didn't. And I think the narcissism of self-loathing he gets exactly right. Now, that's good. That seems to me as a good...
Inadvertently.
Right, well,
okay.
He both knows and he doesn't know.
Can I give you the opposite?
Yeah.
When he's talking about Houseman, about which he talks absolute rubbish, but at his Wildean lowest, Oscar never slumped to such leaden fatigue. What on earth does that mean? I'm still trying to find out what a tram-trammelled novelist might be.
Who is the tram-trammelled novelist?
He's talking about tram-trammelled novelists in general.
Oh, right, okay.
They're people in Manchester.
I think I know. Do you know what is odd about this prose, though? Because, I wrote down countless. There are, he writes about Susie Sue differing from him on the memory of their encounter. And she says, her account naturally bombasts me with gobbledygook and ignites her own leniency. And you think, he can't possibly know what ignites all leniency means, but... there's a sort of charge to this prose, which you imagine if you set it to Johnny Marr's guitar...
Yes, it works as a pop
would work.
Yeah.
And that's why his lyrics work.
At one moment, he's talking about Susie Sue and her cat suit and the suite, and I laughed out loud. I think he does really have... he has a sense of humour, he's got a wit, and he has sometimes the ability to frame words, but he's got no self-consciousness. And the man who accuses Thatcher of saying, "We are a grandmother," calls himself in the third person the whole time. How can he do that?
Well, there is no openness to the possibility that editing might make it better. I think that is the problem. So you get 70 pages in which he settles his score with the judge who gave, in his view, the wrong result in his kind of courtroom battle over royalties. It is beyond tedious. Somebody must have begged him to take it out, or perhaps they didn't dare try.
Yeah, paragraphs would have been good, full stops would have been good, chapters might have been useful.
The entire book might have been useful.
But it's not in the... the idea that it's a Penguin classic, we have to say something about this as well. It's not Ovid, is it?
It's not Ovid, but something in me rejoices to his cheek and his chutzpah in getting them to agree to it. I think they shouldn't have done it, but I still think there's a kind of triumph in his ability to get it done.
I agree. This is a story of a man who came from the worst circumstance, and he is determined to win, even though he's a complete mess, and I do think there's something admirable about it. Actually, this book made me want to listen to him, and I think it will make people want to listen to him because there is such a life force behind this, even if it is very malevolent and very confused.
Charles Fraser, I'll give you the last word.
Well, I can forgive him the self-absorption, but I sort of can't really forgive him how unpleasant he is about other people.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Actually, I can't give you the last word, because the world would be a poorer place without him, all told, as unpleasant as he is, I think. Anyway, Autobiography by Morrissey is published by Penguin Classics.